It's the Locked On Flyers podcast for Monday, July 17th, your daily dose of Flyers news, analysis, and high quality content that kind of wants to say I told you so, but maybe not.
You know you do.
Yeah, we kind of called the Tony DeAngelo buyout on Friday show. We're going to get into that. Plus, we're going to talk about the current state of the Flyers. Is this it? Plus, our Nemesis of the week, all on today's show.
You're Locked On Flyers, your daily podcast on the Philadelphia Flyers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there. Thanks for making Locked On Flyers your first listen every day. I am Rachel Donner. You can find me on Twitter at rmiriam. I'm here as always with Russ Cohen, who's on all your favorite social media apps at Sportsology. We are also as a show on Instagram and Threads at Locked On Flyers. You can subscribe or follow us for free on YouTube. We're on the Sirius XM app. Anywhere you listen to podcasts, you'll get our latest episode as soon as it's available here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. Russ, we did a whole episode on Friday about the Tony DeAngelo situation, if the trade was going to go through, if it wasn't going to go through, what the fallout would be, as well as, how then it would cascade from a player personnel effect down to the blue line for the Flyers and the prospects as well. And sure enough, we got word that he was being put on waivers for purposes of termination of the contract. The buyout isn't officially official yet, but it's happening. And if Cap Friendly says it's happening, I believe it's happening. So,
this is actually happening.
Yes. Yes, this is actually happening. So obviously the Carolina deal never panned out because of various reasons that we talked about on the Friday show. I think, it is kind of fun in a way that Tony DeAngelo is the first NHL player bought out twice.
Yeah, it's unusual. And people should know, like we actually had to record a day in advance. And so we even, we're thinking about it 2 days before it happened. So to schedule the show for that. So yeah, because we're thinking this doesn't look good. This doesn't feel good anymore. It doesn't seem like this trade's going through. And look, to be very honest, I'm not sure Erik Karlsson's moving either. I mean, but that's a whole other discussion for another day. But as far as this goes, the Flyers do lose out on getting an asset from Carolina. I know some people are like, well, if it's just an AHLer, who cares? Well, I mean, again, sometimes you do get an AHLer, and regardless of what I say and Rachel says and anybody says, they do way better than you think. Like, you don't know. That's the whole thing. That's why you still take the player. And then they also have an extra year of retention that they weren't counting on. So there's that because of the buyout. So that's where they get hurt a bit. And also, look, my gut or spidey sense tells me that DeAngelo is still going to sign with Carolina for like a 2-year deal for either like $1 million a year or $1.5 million, and they're going to save on this. You watch. That's just my gut feeling. It may not happen, but I think it's happening.
Interesting. Yeah, I would be simultaneously surprised and not at all shocked if that happens.
Right.
It's just one of those things with Tony DeAngelo. The cap hit for the Flyers is an issue. Now, it's less for this year than it would have been in a 50% salary retention, but it lasts over 2 years. So we have a $1.67 million cap hit for this season and next season. And that brings us to the total dead cap space that we're looking at for this upcoming season. So if you count the Hayes retained salary, the DeAngelo buyout hit, and the Oscar Lindblom buyout from last year, we have a $5.9 million dead cap space this season. It's about 15% of the cap, depending on how you calculate it, what players are on the Flyers versus the Phantoms, the goaltenders. There's a lot of and how much we're going to pay Morgan Frost, right? There's a lot
Right.
of moving parts to get the
Right.
exact percentage, but it's going to hover around 15% regardless. Next season, we're still at 5.2 million in cap space. You drop the Lindblom part of it. You still have Hayes and DeAngelo for next season. I think this season it's manageable. Next season, depending
It's
on
gonna
what
hurt.
moves they want to make, it's going to hurt next season, I think. But it's one of those things. It's like the cost benefit analysis. The Flyers have decided that this is what's in their best interests, or the best scenario that they could come up with given all of the potentialities. And there was just no way to keep DeAngelo on the team.
Right, because of the current coach. Like, that's the reason. So, the only thing here, Rachel, again, this has happened to the Flyers before. So, they got Chuck Fletcher, they went a certain direction, then they got John Tortorella, and they tried to go his direction. Now, what if in another year, John Tortorella doesn't go in the team's direction? Like, you know what I mean? Like, then that could really, again, the Flyers would be like, oh, okay, so do we bring John back with 2 years left, or do we let him go because he doesn't really want to do this and we want to do this? Like, again, that's still we're going to find that out this season.
Yeah, I think so. Right now, everything that Danny Briere is saying is that he and Torts are on the same page. They talk all the time. They spent all that time in the press box together at the end of this past season. And, everything they've said is sort of like, yes, we're on the same page here. But things do change.
This
and
is sports.
It's a possibility.
We know. Yeah.
Yeah.
Things happen
So,
in season.
Yeah. And it's not necessarily a bad thing if things
No.
change and people's philosophy goes in different directions because of circumstances. It's just like that is going to be a wrinkle that we'll have to keep an eye on in the next year to 2 years, I would say.
Right. I mean, really, at the end of this year, if you want this rebuild to kind of go on schedule and say it's going to take 3 more years, everybody has to be on the same page. Everything's got to be pointing right. If it's not, then that's where you might look at John and say, okay, do you not want to do this? And because you can't go back and you can't stop it midstream. I mean, you can, but it would be really foolish, right? So that's where the dilemma still lies with this, is that now the whole organization is bought in for this, and the coach says he's bought in for this, but now we have to see the coach fully do this, because we have to remember last year took a toll on John. Like, it was harder than he thought. He admitted that. It was different than he thought. The conversation that he had with Chuck Fletcher turned out to be way different than what actually happened on the ice.
Yep. It's true. So looking at this upcoming year, in terms of the short-term issues at hand, I think with DeAngelo bought out, that likely means that Zamula moves up to the Flyers on a more permanent basis, again, just because of the waiver situation. I think that's the baseline assumption we have to make. We talked about that on Friday's show a lot too, so you can go back and listen to that for a more detailed look at it. But it is a TBD question, that's for sure.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be up to the player. The player's got to impress the coach. He's got to earn the playing time. But again, if the coach falls back and wants some of these veterans to play a lot, like Sealer and Stahl, then Zamula could end up getting scratched a lot of games. Like, we just don't know which way it's going to go yet.
Yeah, we don't. So that's an outstanding question. It also solidifies the exact, or close to the exact, dollar amount left for Morgan Frost. So that sort of begs the question, is that contract coming any day now? Or do you think, we're due for some additional negotiations because now Frost's agent knows what the dollar figure available is to them?
I don't think that changes a lot, because I think the Flyers had an idea of the ballpark it was in. And I think once DeAngelo's situation is complete and it's, on the books, I think in a day or two after that, you'll see Frost's contract get signed. If not that day, because I think they have a pretty good ballpark idea with negotiations already where it's kind of go. And that's why, Briere looked at this and said, well, I got to find more money.
Yeah, I think so as well. I would expect it in no later than a week
Right.
from when the buyout officially goes through. So yeah, I think, it sort of brings us to the question then, other than, dotting I's and crossing T's, like, is this it? Are we set on the 23-24 Philadelphia Flyers? And what is that? And we're going to talk about exactly what this team is now coming up next.
Take your first swing at betting MLB on FanDuel and get 10 times your first bet in bonus bets, up to $200. That's right. Just bet $20 and you'll land $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. That's $200 you could spend betting everything from the money line to the over-under to who you think is going to hit the first home run. All on an app that's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Plus, when you win, you can get paid instantly. There's no better place to bet MLB than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So sign up today and visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get up to $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, official partner of Major League Baseball.
Just a reminder that we are in our off-season mode for the rest of the summer. So our next episode will be on Wednesday, where we're going to look at the forward scenarios with or without Sean Couturier and Cam Atkinson. A lot of question marks there. So we are looking forward to that discussion, plus your mailbag questions. So get them in via email at lockedonflyers@gmail.com. You can comment over on YouTube, or you can tweet us at lockedonflyers.
Even though we're in off-season mode, I'm still going to trim my beard, though.
All right. Yeah, for time at the cottage, right?
Right.
Exactly. All right. So, we do have a couple of other small moves to be made by the Flyers, or decisions to make, in addition to the Morgan Frost contract. There's only 2 players left who were on 2-way deals left from this past season without a contract somewhere. And that's Jackson Cates and Max Wellman, both of whom had call-up time with the Flyers this past season. They're, 2 of the top guys on the Phantoms. And I think that, it's important for the Phantoms, no doubt, to deal with these guys. I'm not sure Max Wellman is going to return. I think he may want to seek some opportunities elsewhere in terms of getting more NHL time, or like
Right.
a 2-way deal somewhere else. I think kind of the writing's on the wall for him in the Flyers organization. But I think Jackson Cates, because he plays center, there's more opportunity for him to stay in the Flyers organization. Plus Noah is there. So that is my somewhat light prediction here, is that Cates will be back and Wellman will not. But where do you think we're at?
I agree with it. And I don't think it's Jackson just because of Noah. I think it's because there's still opportunity with this team too. And he is kind of like a bubble NHL guy. Like he, for 7-8 games, 2 weeks, he could definitely fill a role there. There's no question in my mind. It's just, we don't know if he'll get better to the point where he could play every day. Where Wellman, I do think we've seen everything Max Wellman has to offer.
Yeah, and I love Max Wellman. Don't get me wrong.
Good energy, good skater. There's some really good things there.
And his development story is just tremendous. The fact that he, was drafted by the Sabres, but then kind of got left by the wayside, played in the ECHL and worked his way up. Love his story. Talked about it extensively on this show. Be very sad to see him leave the organization. But I just, being realistic, I think that things might be better for him elsewhere. And so I think that would be the best option for him. But again, would love to see him back if there's a way to make it work. But yeah, with Jackson Cates, I think there's more opportunity there. Like I said, he can play center, which there's a need for that in the Flyers organization. So I think there's more of a chance of him getting re-signed by the organization. Now, those 2 guys assigned, I think that, there are some questions to answer at camp in terms of the players on the margins, but I think we've got the team that we've got, Russ.
Yeah, I think, unless there's a big injury and all of a sudden they're going to have to bring in somebody, or I mean, I'll say it like this: if something happens with the Hockey Canada situation, maybe that does change their direction in net. It could, because maybe then they look at it and say, "Look, we don't expect to be a great team here, but maybe this is a bridge too far with this goaltending too. If you didn't have Carter Hart, I think that's fair to say that they might have to look at that."
Yeah, I think so. And, I think, where Felix Sandstrom and Sam Ersson and Cal Peterson fit into the picture is to be determined. I
Yes.
think that it is a big conversation to have.
And it may end up
And
being nothing, but it's just something you have to broach. And I'm sure it's been talked about in the organization just in case, like, because you don't know.
you don't know at all. And I think that it is the biggest question for me going into this season is the goaltending and who is going to end up, being on the Flyers, and what they're going to do with Felix Sandstrom in particular, I think is a big question, given that they like Sam Ersson a lot, it seems. But I think it'll be a battle at camp. I think they really honestly are going to use that as a determining
Mm-hmm.
factor, because they both had positive play last season. And we saw and we've discussed that Sam Ersson was really just worked too hard toward the end of last season, and really having a
Oh,
more
there's no question.
realistic.
We talked about that extensively. And even I think the team realized it in the end.
Yeah, so I think that that is the big question here. But as far as the skaters go, I think we're pretty close to what we've got.
Yes.
I think Tyson Forster seems to be the guy that's going to be a lock on the team from a forward perspective. That was sort of that moved up last season. We talked about Zamula in the first segment. And I think, beyond that, there could be some battles. I think, we've talked about the Wade Allison situation, that he's kind of the
Yeah.
odd man out. We'll get into that more on the Wednesday show when we look at the forward lines. But I think that there's, some questions in terms of which prospects will take a step forward, who's going to be the press box forward for the bulk of the season, if they carry a full roster like we hope that they do.
Right.
And yeah, I think that's kind of where they're at.
And then there's that weird thing with Emil Andre too, right? We're kind of waiting to see what happens. HV71, I think, has to approve him
Yeah.
playing here, right? So we haven't heard anything about that yet either.
Yeah, I do think it's going to happen, though.
I do too. I have
think
no reason to think otherwise. But again, we can't predict the future. I mean, sometimes we can, but we really can't.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think that sort of says, okay, we're doing a rebuild. We're in year one. Like, where do the Flyers stand in the division and the league overall? And is this, a positive thing for the rebuild and for prospect development?
Right. Yeah.
So as far as like in the league overall, I mean,
Mhm.
you look at it, Flyers have to be in the bottom 5 in the league, right?
Yeah. Here's the funny thing. I thought even before they got aggressive with the buyouts and everything, they would be a bottom 5 team. So now,
Mhm.
to me, they're definitely a bottom 5 and could be bottom 3.
Yeah, I think, a big question is going to be on that about Couturier's return and Atkinson's return and what they look
Yes.
like. And again, that's like a topic for another show. But as it stands now and what we know now, I think that puts them as a bottom 5 team in the league. And I think for this part of the rebuild, that's a good thing. I think that'll give the Flyers the draft picks they need. And I think it'll give them the opportunities at trade deadline to get more assets. I think that it positionally, and I think other than that dead cap space for next season, which is again is worrying me more than the one for this season, it puts us in a pretty solid position.
Yeah, I think right now, I think they're pointing more in a solid position. They know what they are. Maybe they'll overachieve a little. Again, this is a situation where you don't want to overachieve a lot. You don't want to get too far out of the top 5, honestly. But we'll see what happens with that. Around the league, like the league knows I mean, here's the thing. I know that the coach wants the team to be hard to play against. Okay. And teams will play along with that and they'll say, yeah, they're hard to play against. But the Flyers are still going to lose a lot of games. So hockey players are always willing to put up a fight, even if they're going to get a win, right? So there's not much worry about teams coming into Philly. There's not.
Yeah, I think so. But I also think there could be a lot of fun here with some of these
Sure.
guys. There's some good personalities. We've got some good prospects. I think the Phantoms are going to be a ton of fun this year. Like that lineup is shaping up real well, I think. So I think there's a lot of fun to be had this season. And
Yeah, I think they're going to
playing
score
without,
more. I think they're going to score more,
yeah,
and I think they're going to give up more. Like I just think that's the formula. So, yeah, if you get more goals, if you get someone like Forster who can get hot, people will really enjoy seeing his shot. There's a lot to watch. I mean, I'm not saying you shouldn't watch them. There's a lot to watch. But and Phantoms wise too, I do think the Phantoms have a chance to be better. So I
yeah.
actually think there's going to be more improvement in the Phantoms than with the Flyers.
Yeah, I just think, the Flyers are going to be playing with house money this
Yeah.
season. And I think it's a great season to have fun with it and see where the prospects develop and go from there. But that is a good segue to our next segment. We are going to do a weekly summer poll question for y'all over on YouTube. And we will get to that plus our Nemesis of the week coming up next. Russ, I think I can speak for both of us when I say that we had so much fun with the poll questions that we put out related to the giveaways that we did with the comments over on the YouTube posts and, getting your feedback out there in terms of, what your take is on certain players and all of that. And so we wanted to keep it going for the rest of the summer. So we're going to do a weekly poll question, put it out on Monday, and we'll talk about the results on the Friday show. So this week's poll question is, who is going to take the biggest step forward this upcoming season? And our baked in replies are that you can vote from are Owen Tippett, Cam York, Bobby Brink, and Tyson Forster, but we'll leave it open in the comments. You can put your own input if you think it's going to be somebody else.
Yep.
Yeah, but very eager to hear what y'all think out there in terms of who's going to take a big step forward this upcoming season. And so go over on YouTube. There's a separate post from the episode that's a poll. And go ahead and take it and give us your comments on it. Can't wait to see what y'all have to say. Looking at our Nemesis of the week, last week we talked about the Russian situation quite a bit with the various goings on with the goaltenders. And is that going to affect the Matvei Michkov situation at all? And so that was my Nemesis of the week. Russ got into his continued hatred of the airlines, which fair enough. I get it.
It's affecting so many. It affected people at a party I was at yesterday. Like, it's unbelievable. But I'm good. Moved on though. I've moved on.
Okay. Well, for me, I think the Nemesis this week, just because of everything we've had to deal with this offseason, is the residual effects of Chuck Fletcher. That is my Nemesis this week. We've had these contracts that have been putting the team in an untenable situation. The DeAngelo contract was a big example. We talked about the Delorier contract being questionable. We talked about the timing and term of the Ristolainen contract affecting things. We talked about the Sanheim contract and how that affected his potential to be traded. So there's all this Chuck Fletcher dirt, like muddying the waters here of this rebuild. And so that's kind of what's been bugging me.
Yeah, you got to wear some high boots for that. All right, so mine is, and this is a big one, sorry. Pizza is not a dumping ground. And we are in a state in this country where, like, there's 15 flavors of Oreos now, and like every soda has to come up with these weird flavors. And so, like, all these TV shows, they're all talking about different flavor profiles. That's all well and good, folks. You can't just put anything you want on a pizza and think that it's good. because that's not the way it works. A lot of people that are doing it don't know what good pizza is. So I suggest you go somewhere in the Northeast and find that good pizza first, so you have something to work off of. But you can't just throw pickles and pineapple and any other garbage on there and expect it to be called pizza, because in my eyes, it's not. So I am fighting for the purity of pizza. And yes, you could definitely have toppings on it. I'm not saying you can't, but it's just there are some things that don't belong on a pizza. And I caution you, don't try it.
Okay. I feel like this is a very specific circumstance we're talking about.
No,
here.
there's a lot. You go
But-
look online. It's everywhere. It's an epidemic.
All right. Well, I think that there is good pizza to be had in many places, but I think there are some guidelines, in terms of what is still a pizza versus a flatbread with stuff on it.
There you go.
I think that there is something to be said for that. However, I am a pineapple on pizza person. I'm sorry, but I am. I think the flavor really works well. I know it's not for everybody, and I'm not saying you have to like it too. I'm just saying I do. So with that, that will do it for today's show. Like I said, we will be back on Wednesday. We're going to talk about those forward scenarios and potential lines with and without Sean Couturier and Cam Atkinson, plus your mailbag questions. So get them in via Twitter at Locked On Flyers. You can email us at lockedonflyers@gmail.com or comment over on YouTube. I'm Rachel. I'm on Twitter at rmiriam. That's RMIRIAM.
I'm Russ. I'm at Sportsology, SPORTSOLOGY.
Have a great day, everyone.